everyone, and welcome back to Digital Diary, The Adventures of a Computerized Quilter. So today we're going to be talking about pricing. So we have Gina and Paige and Georgia and Christine with me. I'm Deanne Perigo. So let's talk a little about how you choose your pricing. How do you start with it? Is it according to other prices in the area or your skill level? What have we got, ladies? How about Paige?
Oh, me first. Okay.
Okay.
Well, I came from a property management job, and we would do market surveys all the time of what the other properties were going for. So I literally did that. I called around and I found out what the other long armors in my area were doing. They were all charging per square inch. And coming from a different field, I was thinking in square feet because of apartments. And really, I decided I was going to do square yards, because if you could see me from here to here, it's a long ways out, is a square yard. I'm a long arm quilter. I can think in terms of that. So I did start setting my prices according to where everybody else was. I didn't charge the way they did. They did square inch, I did square yards, but I started by putting myself about in the medium. I didn't want to be at the bottom because it would be hard to raise prices, and I didn't want to be at the top because I felt my skill level wasn't there yet.
Mm-hmm. Gina, you've moved recently.
Yes.
Did you notice a difference in your pricing between the two places that you've lived?
Yes, it's interesting. Different cities, one city can be a little higher than the other. So it's good to check on that because you don't want to be the cheapest game in town. You don't want to be the most expensive game in town either. But I did notice that there is a real geographic difference in pricing. One of the things I wanted to mention that Paige was talking about too, when I started, I set my prices per square inch, and I did some research at what was around in the general area, the prices, but I felt like I wasn't confident enough to match some of these other master quilters prices, especially in custom area when I first began. And so what I did was give people business cards with a discount. And I started at those prices, but I handed out discounted cards so that my prices actually started out lower. It was one very, very nice quilter gave me excellent advice and told me how hard it would be to raise my prices later. And so that's one way that I got started on pricing.
Can I add, are all of us, I'm in a metropolitan area, and is anybody here more rural?
I was more in a rural area. I'm a little closer to the city now, and I do think it has an effect. We actually had in our area a lot of, well, we know what we call them, $50 quilters. You know, for $50, I'll provide the backing and the batting and bind it and do all of it, you know. But I think what that does is it taught me early on to be very careful when you're doing your pricing and trying to see how much everybody pays around you and how much everybody charges around you, because you have to compare apples to apples. And it's very easy to feel like I'm way overpriced until you see the quality of the quilting they do. So I think you have to add that part, comparing yourself to people who do the same work that you do in the same level. And quite frankly, that's one reason I love having a website, is because I can say, if you want to see what kind of quilting I can do and that I do, please go to my website, so that they can see I'm not the big giant meander on a quilt. You know, it's a different kind of quilting. And it took me a little while to latch in because of that.
And that's definitely a good point, because I know for me, I do mostly more modern type things, and a lot of modern designs, even on my edge to edges, run a heck of a lot more dense than your
Right.
standard edge to edge. And so when
Exactly.
I started out pricing, I had to make sure I started out pricing a little bit more on the high end, just because I'm doing a heck of a lot more stitches per inch than everyone else in my
Exactly.
area.
There are a lot of different factors, but I think that's one. And I certainly didn't start at the top, but I didn't start anywhere close to the bottom. And I believe what Gina said, you know, like give a discount in the beginning if you don't feel like you're quite there, so that they understand how much you are going to charge. And I truly, when you get started, how many of us hear people say, oh, I have a quilt you can practice on? Well, that's code word for free. And it's really hard to turn a free customer, a non-paying customer, into a paying customer. Far better to discount. You know, if you want to do free quilting, do it for
That's
charity.
what charity work is
That's
for.
it. Charity,
Quilts of
absolutely.
Valor or a pet
Linus
project.
quilts.
Yeah, pet project for a guild. That's what that's for.
Yeah,
So
I
when you're
totally agree.
setting pricing, do you think about how much per hour you need to derive from it? Even if you're doing, say, by inch or by yard, or do you just think, oh, well, this is what everybody else pays for this?
To me, it's about, even though I charge by the square inch, I have lots of prices built in because it's about the price per hour. And we had a business specialist speak to us and spend a lot of time with us when we started. And he had a good point. He said, you can be the cheapest, you can be the best, but very rarely do you do both at the same time. And so he walked over to my machine, put his hand on the handle because he was just mesmerized by this machine. And he said, clearly, you are not the cheapest. You know, he just said, you have an investment. You have invested in tools that make it not that way. But you can only charge by the hour if you know how many hours it's going to take you to finish a quilt. And I think a lot of people don't take the time. I spent an entire year recording how many hours it took me to do like every quilt I did, because then I had a good feeling for it.
I'd like to jump in on that hourly thing, and I do charge per square yard, but I tracked how long each quilt took me. And and I still do it to this day, every 6 months, I go back and I analyze the data and try and figure out, and that's where you find this custom I made $1 an hour on or something like that. So those are the prices that I raise. So that's how I got into category pricing. I also break out my thread, my batting, and I do a setup fee. So when I'm tracking the quilting charge, that's where I put my hours to that.
Right.
And I could find where this price wasn't working, got my edge to edge where it was, but then the custom had to be broken down into other categories, because some of those categories, like Christine's really dense edge to edge, okay,
Right.
yeah, so now I got 3 edge to edge categories.
Exactly.
And they're all based on time, but I charge per square yard.
Right. But I also think, too, what it did for me when I did all this timing, and you start realizing I made $1.89 an hour, and taxes are going to take 1/3 of that, it steeled me to say, I am raising prices. And if somebody says, how can, I don't really care anymore. That's, it's like I could work somewhere else a lot cheaper and walk away from it, but this is what I love. And so therefore, I'm going to charge what is a fair price. And I literally would tell people, I won't be here next year if I don't make money at this.
Do any of you have minimum charges?
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Definitely, because I know that if I'm bringing in a small wall quilt, I've got to have a minimum on it, or I'm not going to make, 25 bucks is not going to do it, because it's still taking the same amount of time to meet with the customer, to check it in, to load the quilt, to pick out patterns for it, to unload the quilt and meet with the customer again.
I do have a minimum, but I've got a little back end trick to that. If I've got a customer that's done 35 quilts or more with me, I go back to my square yard and I don't hold to the minimum.
Wow.
I will let them put everything on a bigger backing. So if they do like little 30 by 30 inch baby quilts, if they put them all on and one time I had a lady bring me 10 on one backing. But
placemats.
I'm okay with that. It's the loading and stuff that really eats it up, especially if we're doing a lot of times it's the same pattern, everything. I just have to load it. So that's my back end way around it.
Well, I do charge a loading fee, which encourages people to put smaller quilts on one back. Does anyone else do a loading fee?
Nope.
No.
But that's idea.
So when you've raised prices, when have you done it? For what reason? How did it work out?
Well, the best advice I think I was ever given, and this was when I started getting more nationally known, shall we say. Someone told me, start raising your prices until you get one or two customers that just walk away and say, that's too much, I can't do that, I'll save you for later. And then you're starting to get that sweet spot. If people are not necessarily willing to pony up for your price every time, then you're getting into that sweet spot of right where you need to be.
I think when it comes to custom quilting, this is just me, but they know how much time goes into it. You can't tell me they don't. And I think if they don't just a little bit go, when you give them the price,
exactly.
Then the decision. So when I meet someone and they want business help and they say, all they ever want is custom, and then you ask their pricing and they're paying like $50 more than custom, well, who wouldn't want custom at that? So that's a clue. And if you're a nationally recognized person, you're going to do more custom than the other person. But if you're getting started and all you're getting is custom, the number one thing you better be looking at is, are you doing it so inexpensively they don't even have to think about it? Oh yeah, let's do custom. And they're usually good quilters.
Yeah, well, I was doing, when I first started out, like almost all custom. And they were my same customers are taking their edge-to-edge quilts to somebody else. So I started raising prices with the idea that I would lose 80% of those customers. They would move into my edge-to-edge category. And so when I started, I probably did 5% edge-to-edge, and right now I'm doing about 85. So I moved my pricing so that it would affect my percentages of where my quilts were.
That's smart.
What's the benefit of having a computerized quilting system like the Statler or the Elevate as compared to doing it all hand guided, as we're talking price?
Multitasking. And Karen Martetti says it, she's got an employee with a computerized system. So I can literally run, if I'm doing edge to edge, I can run 4 machines by myself. There is downtime because they all stop at the same time. But if you have the setup done ahead of time, so when you just put it on there and run it, you're getting that. I do think custom takes longer with a computerized system, but I'm happy with the accuracy. And I can do semi-custom like the quilt behind me. And that's a huge piece of my business, and it's all computerized and it goes fast.
So how many of you have more than one machine at home or at work?
at work.
So, if you're not running multiple machines, what are you doing while your computerized system is running the machine for you?
Digitizing designs and setting up the next quilt, doing all of the layout for the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, prepping for the next one, or even 2 or 3 in the future. Something comes in and you've got to get ready for it and plan the design, and even bookwork. I mean, there's so many things you can do, and I love multitasking. That's what mamas do, right? We're great multitaskers, and that's one of the best things I love, is not being chained to it there. If I'm not there, it isn't working. That doesn't work for me.
Oh, I just thought of something why I did go computerized. I started off hand guiding. My body, I was really having a toll on my body from standing at that machine, and I don't have to anymore. I can walk away from it.
And the other part is too, like if you're hand guiding, I can promise you how you quilt at, fresh in the morning and at the end of a 16-hour day are 2 different results. Whereas with my Statler, I have been known to put in, way too many hours, but the quality is still the same of the stitching. So, but yeah, we're not getting any younger, and I do think the toll on and I think that's why some people who swore they would never go computerized realize that it really could be a real help to their bodies.
Yeah, I know that when I have a lot of things that I need to get done that's not computerized, not quilting wise, it might be the doing bindings for someone or doing bookwork or digitizing designs or whatever I need to do. I'll put on an edge to edge that is really big and really dense so that I can get a whole lot done.
Just let it work. And
Just
a
let it
foil
work.
that doesn't require coffee. So.
How about you, Gina?
And speaking of, I was just thinking, speaking of coffee, one of the things that I learned early on was that if I didn't load a quilt when I was done for the day and have it ready for the next morning, I got started a lot later because I need my coffee. But if I loaded it the night before, I could still go in there without much caffeine and get it going. And so to me, that was just a really big asset to the computerized quilting, and I could increase my productivity without even being fully awake in the morning. I could get rolling if I loaded the night before. So
that's all about know thyself. And it didn't take me long to realize if I didn't have something ready to go in the morning, it took and the phone would ring and people would come. It would be 10, 11 o'clock sometimes. Otherwise, I'm up quilting, 6 o'clock in the morning half the time. So it does make a difference for me too. That was a great point, Gina.
Well, I think we're going to wrap this up for today. But thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next Digital Diary, Adventures of a Computerized Quilter. So,
Bye.
bye.
Bye.